I never thought a bookstore could feel like a confessional. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of old pages and too strong coffee from the little kiosk near the window. People came and went without looking at one another, flipping through novels they'd never buy, whispering as if too much sound might break the spell of the place. But the moment I saw her, everything sharpened. She wasn't tucked away in the romance aisle where I expected women like her might linger. No, she was at the counter, arguing with the clerk about a delivery, her voice calm but firm. Mid-40s, maybe older, though it was hard to tell. Not because she looked younger, but because there was something timeless about the way she stood there. One hand resting on the counter, the other clutching a leather tote. Her tone patient, but not yielding. I should have looked away. I didn't. When the clerk left to check the storeroom, she exhaled quietly, pressing 2 fingers against her temple as if steadying herself. That tiny motion made her seem less untouchable, more human. I don't know why that detail pinned me in place, but it did. I wandered closer, pretending to study a display of journals. She noticed. "You're blocking the bestsellers," she said without looking at me, her lips curving just slightly. "I didn't think anyone bought those," I answered before I could stop myself. That earned me a glance, sharp at first, then softened by something unreadable. Not everyone buys them. Some of us just wait for the ones we can't let go. Her words hung in the air longer than they should have. I don't even know if she meant them the way I heard them. Still, my throat tightened, and I nodded like an idiot, pretending to be fascinated by a cover I couldn't even see. She shifted her bag higher on her shoulder, the faint scrape of leather against her coat sleeve loud in the quiet shop. "Do you work here?" "No," the answer came out too quickly. "I just come here sometimes. To waste time." She studied me the way people study a page they're not sure how to read. Not unkindly, not judgmental, just measuring. That gaze lasted half a second too long, and I swear the silence between us grew louder than the hum of the lights. The clerk reappeared, breaking whatever held us. He set a wrapped package on the counter. She thanked him politely, took her receipt, and turned to leave. But as she passed me, something happened, small, unremarkable to anyone else, but enough to burn itself into my memory. Her tote slipped, just slightly, and I reached out without thinking. My fingers brushed against hers as I steadied the strap. It lasted less than a heartbeat, but she didn't pull away immediately. She looked at me instead, her eyes steady, and for that single flicker of time, I thought I'd forgotten how to breathe. "Thank you," she said softly, like it wasn't the bag she was talking about. And then she was gone, walking out into the gray afternoon, leaving only the faint scent of her perfume and the echo of words she hadn't spoken. I stood there long after she left, gripping the edge of a shelf as if it could steady me. I couldn't explain it, why a stranger's voice and a half-smile could undo me. But I knew this much. I'd never think of that bookstore the same way again. Because every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing her say it. Some of us just wait for the ones we can't let go. And I already knew she was the one I wouldn't. I didn't expect to see her again, not so soon. Maybe not ever. But 2 days later, I walked into the bookstore cafe, and there she was, at the far corner table, glasses perched low on her nose, papers spread around like she'd built a wall no one was supposed to cross. I froze for a moment, coffee halfway to my lips. The safe thing would have been to take a seat by the window and pretend she was just another stranger. But the truth was, I couldn't. She noticed me first this time. Her eyes lifted over the rim of her glasses, lingered just long enough for recognition to flicker, and then she looked back down at her pages as if I were nothing but background noise. I told myself I'd just nod, order coffee, leave it at that. But somehow I found myself walking toward her table. "Hi," I said, awkward enough to hate myself for it. Her pen paused mid-scribble. "You again. Not cold, not warm, just measured." "You look like you're grading essays," I said, glancing at the papers. "I am." Her tone was clipped, but her hand betrayed her, fingers tightening around the pen, then loosening. She set it down slowly, as though she'd remembered she didn't have to hold on so hard. I smiled, though my chest felt heavy. "You must be a teacher." She let out the faintest laugh, low and almost bitter. "Was. Past tense." Now I just correct other people's mistakes for a living. There was something in her voice that made me want to sit down, though she hadn't invited me. I didn't. Instead, I stood there, studying the way her shoulders carried a weight invisible to everyone else in the cafe. Sounds exhausting, I said. Her eyes flicked up at me again, softer this time. For half a second, I saw something, fatigue, maybe, or loneliness, but it was gone before I could name it. She adjusted her glasses, a quiet barrier sliding back into place. You're too young to worry about things like exhaustion, she said, almost like a dismissal. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I'd noticed the way her laugh didn't quite reach her eyes, that the faint smudge of ink on her fingers told me she'd been working longer than she should. But I didn't. I just nodded. Still, I couldn't stop watching. The way she tapped her pen absent-mindedly. The way her hand trembled for just a fraction of a second when she reached for her cup. The way she caught herself and steadied, as though weakness wasn't something she allowed herself. I'll let you get back to it, I said finally, stepping away. But before I turned, she stopped me. Not with words, just a glance, lingering, uncertain, as though she wasn't sure if she wanted me to go at all. It was nothing, really. Just an unfinished look across a table stacked with papers. But it stayed with me, heavier than anything she could have said. The third time wasn't an accident. She knew it. I knew it. The bookstore cafe closed early for inventory, so she let me carry boxes with her into the back room. It wasn't much, just a cramped office that smelled of dust and strong cleaner, light flickering overhead. Rain slapped against the single window, a storm rolling in harder than the forecast had warned. You don't have to help, she said, slipping her coat off, draping it across a chair. I don't mind, I answered, stacking another box beside hers. Her sleeves were rolled to her elbows, ink stains smudged on her hand. She looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. And still, there was something magnetic about her exhaustion, like she was allowing me to see a piece of her no one else did. We worked in silence. The storm outside filled the space between us, thunder rattling the window, rain blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold. At some point, we both reached for the same box. My hand brushed hers, warmer than I expected. She didn't pull away. Not right away. Her breath hitched, almost inaudible. But I heard it. I wanted to say something, anything, about how I hadn't stopped thinking about her, about how she looked when she laughed that first day, how her silence was louder than any words. But all I managed was, you should take a break. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp and searching. For a moment, it felt like she was about to let me in, like she might actually tell me what weighed on her shoulders. But then her phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. She grabbed it too quickly, answered with a voice that was steadier than her face looked. Yes, I'm here. No, I told you, I can't tonight. A pause. Her back half turned to me. Please don't call me like this anymore. She ended the call, pressing her palm to her forehead, fingers curled tight. When she finally turned back, her smile was there, but cracked at the edges. Sorry. Work stuff. I didn't believe her, but I didn't push. Instead, I picked up another box, gave her the space she clearly wanted. Except my chest ached with restraint, with the words I wasn't saying. We stacked the last of the boxes in silence. She brushed past me to grab her coat, and for a split second her shoulder grazed mine. Not intentional, but not entirely avoidable either. She froze. So did I? The storm cracked outside, rattling the glass. If I leaned forward, just slightly, I could have kissed her. Or maybe just brushed my forehead against hers. Something small, something dangerous. Instead, I stepped back. Too fast, too obvious. She let out a breath I wasn't supposed to hear. Then she walked past me, her coat clutched close, as though we hadn't just stood on the edge of something we couldn't name. And I told myself I was glad I hadn't crossed it. I was lying. I didn't see her for a week after that storm. Every day I told myself it didn't matter, that I could just walk past the bookstore, keep my head down, and not care. But my feet betrayed me. They always led me back. And when I finally saw her again, sitting alone at that same corner table, glasses off, eyes fixed on a half-empty cup of coffee, I realized the distance had made it worse. I walked over. She didn't look up right away. Only when I pulled out the chair across from her did she exhale, long and sharp, as if she'd been bracing for something. You shouldn't, she murmured. Shouldn't what? Sit here. Her voice wasn't harsh, just tired. Why not? Her fingers tightened around her cup. Her nails tapped the porcelain, restless. Because this isn't, she stopped, shaking her head. It isn't anything. The silence that followed was heavier than words. People moved around us, ordering drinks, laughing, flipping pages, but it felt like the two of us sat in a vacuum where sound didn't reach. I leaned forward, careful. It doesn't feel like nothing. Her eyes finally met mine. And there it was, the same guarded distance, but weaker now, fraying at the edges. She tried to hold it, but I could see through. You're young, she said finally, each word dragged out. You don't know what you want. Maybe not, but I know I keep ending up here. With you. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but nothing came. Instead, she looked away, pressing her hands flat against the table, as if grounding herself. What are we doing? She whispered, more to herself than to me. The question hung between us. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because if I said what I wanted, it would change everything. And if I stayed silent, maybe we could both keep pretending. Except we didn't. She let out a shaky laugh. Too soft, too brittle. This isn't supposed to happen. Not at my age. Not with. She gestured vaguely at me, her hand trembling before she pulled it back. I should have reached across the table. Should have said something that would break the wall without breaking her. Instead, I swallowed hard and forced my voice steady. I don't care how old you are. Her eyes snapped back to mine. And for the first time, she didn't hide. The fatigue, the regret, the fear, they were all there, laid bare in the way her throat tightened, the way her hands fidgeted, the way her eyes glistened before she blinked it away. You should, she said softly, almost like a plea. Because I already do. And there was no storm, no slammed door, no phone call that could make that moment less devastating. It was raining again the night, she told me. Not the heavy, violent kind like before. This was softer, almost hesitant, tapping against the cafe windows as if it didn't want to be heard. We hadn't planned to meet. I'd only stopped in for coffee, convincing myself I wasn't looking for her. But she was there, sitting at the far end, not with papers or books this time, just a single photograph resting on the table. She didn't notice me until I slid into the chair across from her. You shouldn't make a habit of this, she said, but her voice was thin, like her defenses had been worn down all day. I nodded toward the photo. Who's that? She hesitated, then pushed it slightly closer, as if daring me to look. A man, smiling, around my age, maybe a little older. His arm draped around her shoulders in the picture, her hair longer than, her eyes brighter. He was 24, she said quietly. I was 39. Everyone told me it wouldn't last. I didn't breathe. Her finger brushed the edge of the photo, tracing it like it might disappear if she let go. They were right. He didn't last. She swallowed, eyes flicking away. Car accident. 3 years ago. The rain outside seemed louder, though I knew it wasn't. My chest tightened, like the air had been stolen from the room. You remind me of him, she added, so quietly I almost missed it. Not your face. Not exactly. But the way you'd show up. Without asking. Without permission. I wanted to say something. Anything. But my mouth was dry, my thoughts a storm. Was that why she pulled away? Why her laugh always sounded like it carried weight? Why her eyes softened at the strangest moments? Like she was staring at a memory instead of me. She let out a shaky laugh, setting the photo back down. It's not fair, I know. Comparing. Pretending. Whatever this is. Her hands tightened in her lap. That's why I told you to stay away. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, because distance suddenly felt impossible. I'm not him. I know, she whispered. That's the problem. The silence between us shifted. No longer awkward, no longer playful. It was heavier, deeper, threaded with something rawer than either of us had admitted until now. Her hand brushed against the photograph again, but this time she didn't push it toward me. She pulled it back, slipped it into her bag, like closing a chapter she wasn't ready to share. I shouldn't have told you, she said, her voice trembling in a way I hadn't heard before. But I couldn't stop staring at her, not at the polished, guarded woman she showed the world, but at the faint crack she'd let me glimpse. The rain kept tapping at the glass, steady, unrelenting, and I realized with a clarity that shook me. This wasn't just attraction. It was gravity. We didn't see each other for days after that night. She disappeared into her own silence, and I let her. Or maybe I told myself I was letting her, when the truth was I didn't know how to move without her shadow in my thoughts. Then, one evening, I found her in the bookstore again. Not at the cafe table, not at the counter, just sitting on the floor of the history aisle, her back against the shelves, knees drawn up like she'd been carrying the world too long and finally set it down. She looked up when she heard me. No surprise in her eyes this time. No guardedness. Just tired recognition. "You don't quit, do you?" she asked, voice soft, almost amused. I sat down beside her without asking, my shoulder a cautious distance from hers. "Not when it feels like this." She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned her head back against the shelf and closed her eyes. The hum of the lights filled the silence, the faint murmur of a customer browsing nearby. For once, the stillness didn't feel heavy. It felt like a fragile truce. "I keep trying to make sense of it," she said finally, eyes still closed. "Why you? Why now? Why again?" Her hand flexed against her knee, as if holding something invisible. "But it doesn't add up. And maybe it isn't supposed to." Her honesty pulled something raw out of me. "I don't need it to add up." Her eyes opened slowly, turning toward me. And there it was, the shift. The moment when pretense slipped away, when what we weren't saying finally filled the space between us more honestly than words. "You'll regret this," she whispered. Not sharp, not dismissive, just fragile, almost warning herself more than me. "Maybe," I said, "but not tonight." For the first time, she let herself laugh. Not polished, not guarded, just soft, shaky, almost disbelieving. It faded quickly, but it lingered in her eyes. The silence stretched again. She didn't pull away when my hand inched closer, didn't move when our fingers brushed, didn't flinch when they stayed there. Lightly, simply resting. Not a claim, not a demand. Just presence. We sat like that, two people tangled in something we couldn't name but couldn't escape. Her breathing slowed, and at one point her head tilted, not onto my shoulder, not fully, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin just a breath away. Neither of us said what it was. Neither of us tried to define it. Because maybe love isn't always a confession. Maybe it's this, a shared silence, a fragile leaning, two people who shouldn't have found each other but did. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Stay? Just for a while." And in that quiet request, everything collapsed into something we didn't need to name. I'm telling this now from a distance, not of miles, but of time. Enough days, weeks, and months have passed for me to see things I couldn't when I was sitting beside her in that bookstore aisle, fingers brushing, silence saying everything words couldn't. People ask what love feels like, and they expect the answers to be fireworks or passion or something grand. I used to think that too. But with her, it wasn't like that. It was quieter, slower. It was the kind of thing you only notice when you're not looking for it. When you realize someone has become part of your daily thoughts without ever asking permission. She changed me, not in a dramatic, movie-ending way, but in the way she carried regret and still managed to keep moving. In the way she reminded me that love doesn't always wait for the right timing or the right age or what people think should make sense. She taught me that sometimes the most human thing we can do is sit with the weight of another person's past, without trying to erase it or fix it. And I think I changed her too. Not because I was extraordinary, but because I was there, persistent, not afraid to be seen by her, even when she tried to push me away. She once told me I reminded her of someone she lost, and I thought that meant I was just a shadow of a memory. But maybe what I gave her wasn't a replacement. It was permission to feel alive again, to laugh when she thought she couldn't, to sit across from someone and not have to hide the cracks in her voice. We never called it love out loud. Maybe we didn't need to. What we had was quieter, steadier, something that didn't demand a name to be real. It wasn't about ownership or forever or promises we couldn't keep. It was about showing up, about choosing, in small ways, again and again. There were days we drifted and days we came back. There were long silences and moments of laughter that felt like sunlight after too many storms. And through all of it, I kept remembering that first time she said, "Some of us just wait for the ones we can't let go." I used to think she was talking about someone else. But now, I wonder if, just maybe, she was talking about me. So if you're listening to this, waiting for me to give you a neat ending, I don't have one. What I have is this: the memory of her hand brushing mine, the quiet of a shared space, the lesson that love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just staying. And maybe that's enough. What about you? Do you think love needs words to be real? Or is it already there, in the silences we share?